Welcome. If you're here, you're probably not looking for a typical history lesson. You're looking for something slower, something a little softer. Maybe something that slips past your thoughts and settles deep into your imagination, like dust gathering on ancient stone. So dim the lights, turn on a fan, let the hum of the modern world fade into the shadows for just a while. Let me know where you're watching from, and as you do, picture this: Rome. Not the tourist Rome, not the ruins, but Rome as it once was, living, breathing, pulsing, a city of contradictions. Opulence and squalor, poetry and blood, steel and silence. Tonight, we begin our journey not with its fall, not even its birth, but with its height. When marble gleamed under a Mediterranean sun, and when the world bowed, willingly or not, beneath the Roman eagle, and beneath that sun, were people, just like you, just like me. Let's go back. There's a silence in the air just before dawn. Not the silence of sleep, but the silence of a city about to wake. It lingers over the hills and valleys surrounding Rome, hangs in the mist rising off the Tiber River, and touches the marble columns of the Forum with a ghostly stillness. In this moment, the city holds its breath. And then the faint clatter of a wooden cart's wheels against cobblestone, a dog barking in the distance, a woman calling softly to her child. Rome is waking. It is the 2nd century after Christ, and the empire is at its zenith. From the green hills of Britannia to the golden dunes of Africa, from the Atlantic shores of Hispania to the deep rivers of Mesopotamia, all roads, as the saying goes, lead here. To this place, to this beating heart of empire. Imagine walking through the city streets. Your sandals slap against the stone. The sun hasn't fully risen yet, but the air is already thick with the scent of life. Fresh bread from a baker's oven, sweat from the night's labor, the faint tang of iron, sewage, and incense. Rome does not smell clean, but it smells alive. You pass narrow alleys where families are stirring in cramped tenement blocks, the insulae. These tall, rickety buildings creak with the shifting weight of hundreds of lives. Children chase each other down staircases that tremble underfoot. A woman empties a chamber pot out a window with a warning shout, and just across the street, a villa. Walled, gated, silent, its garden glistens with dew. A slave has already begun sweeping the marble courtyard, careful not to wake the household. In these villas, the walls are painted with myth and memory, frescoes of gods, heroes, and wine-drenched feasts. The contrast is sharp, cruel, even, but it is the reality of this world. Rome is a city of layers, not just of class and architecture, but of time. Walk far enough and you might stumble into a temple older than memory, a column scarred by fire, a road paved by legions now long dead. And above all this, above the markets and monuments, towers the dome of the Pantheon, open to the heavens. A place where gods once listened, or perhaps still do. The streets grow busier as the light strengthens. Merchants set up their stalls, laying out olives, figs, cheeses, and amphorae of wine. The voices grow louder, Latin, of course, but also Greek, Punic, Aramaic, Egyptian, Gallic. The empire is a chorus of tongues. A senator glides past in a litter carried by slaves, his toga arranged just so, his eyes scanning the crowds but never seeing them. He will spend his morning in the Curia, debating grain imports or border wars. His decisions will ripple outward, changing lives in places he'll never see. Perhaps he knows, perhaps he doesn't care. A few blocks away, in the Subura district, a smith's hammer rings out, sharp, rhythmic. Sparks fly. The forge is already boiling with heat, and sweat beads on his brow. His hands are blackened, his arms like braided rope. He will die young, he knows this, but today, his work is good. And that is enough. Further down the street, a group of children sit cross-legged in a dusty courtyard. A tutor paces before them, reciting lines from Virgil. The boys chant after him in unison, their voices stumbling over the syllables. Arma virum cano, I sing of arms and the man. There is pride in this, even for the poor. Education is a treasure in Rome, even if it is unevenly shared. The empire believes in words as much as it believes in war, and everywhere, there are soldiers, retired centurions in sandals worn thin, young recruits with eyes too bright, veterans with scars beneath their tunics. They are Rome's spine, its shield, its iron will. And in peacetime, they police the streets, or stand watch beneath triumphal arches carved with the glories of conquest. It is easy to romanticize, to forget the blood. But it's there, always just beneath the surface. At the edge of the city, past the villas and gardens, lie the latifundia, sprawling estates worked by hundreds of slaves. Some were captured in distant wars, others were born to servitude. A few teach the children of their masters, most break their backs beneath the sun. There are no laws to protect them, only luck. The empire runs on this invisible suffering, on grain shipped in from Egypt, on taxes extracted from distant provinces, on the shoulders of those who will never see the glory they helped build. And yet, there is glory, there is beauty. As midday approaches, the forum is flooded with sunlight. The white marble glows gold, statues of emperors and gods stare down with eternal calm. Orators shout above the din, trying to win support for this or that policy. Foreign ambassadors in fine silk robes glide through the crowd, pickpockets slip unseen between them. Everything happens at once. There are trials in the basilica, debates in the curia, business deals in shaded corners. Rome never sleeps, it merely shifts its weight from one foot to another. The chaos has a rhythm, a purpose, and above it all, in the Palatine Hill Palace, the emperor, Marcus Aurelius, walks alone in his garden. His beard is flecked with gray, his eyes are tired. He writes in a leather-bound notebook, his thoughts private, searching, fragile. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. He won. He rules a vast and fragile world. He knows it will not last forever. But for now, he watches the sun fall across his city. And he breathes. As evening comes, the light softens. Torches are lit. The laughter from taverns grows louder. Wine flows. Lovers meet in the shadows. A performer twirls fire in the street. A baby cries. A prisoner is led in chains. Rome exhales. Tonight, the city will dream. And so will we. Tomorrow, we will wake again into this world and dive deeper. But for now, listen to the night sounds. Feel the marble cooling beneath your feet. And remember, this empire, like all empires, is made not of stone but of people. The light of morning over Rome was rarely quiet. Even before the sun lifted above the tiled rooftops and marble domes, the city stirred, not gently, but as if waking from a dream already in motion. You could hear it, the clatter of hooves on stone, the creak of wooden carts, the low murmurs of vendors setting up their stalls in the still cool air of dawn. A chorus of labor, life, and survival echoing through narrow alleys and open squares. Imagine walking through those streets, the scent of fresh bread drifting from a nearby taberna, mingling with smoke, with the sharp, almost metallic tang of the Tiber River, dust rising from sandals, fabric brushing against brick, the occasional jingle of coin. Rome was a living body, always moving, always breathing, never truly silent. And within that body, every man, woman, and child played a part. In the great machinery of empire, most were cogs too small to be remembered by name, yet it was their hands that built the roads, their backs that bore the marble, their sweat that soaked into the foundations of greatness. Beneath the veneer of opulence and order, life for the majority was fragile. Rhythmic, yet uncertain. The plebeian class, the commoners, knew this well. Their days began early, often before first light. A fisherman rising from his cramped insular room to drag his nets from the banks of the Tiber, a baker fanning embers in his oven, sweat already purling on his brow. A seamstress threading her needle in the half-dark, her fingers cracked from years of toil. These were not stories sung in marble halls, but lived out quietly, again and again, day after day. And always, the city loomed above them, the monuments, the statues, the triumphal arches, all reminders of power far beyond their reach. Yet in this grand imbalance, there was a strange beauty, a resilience, a kind of poetry carved from endurance. The streets bore witness to all of it. Lovers parting at sunrise, children chasing stray dogs through puddles. Elderly veterans leaning on worn canes, their eyes distant, remembering battles no one else did. But there was also laughter, a boy sneaking grapes from a stall. A girl scolding him with a grin. Even in hardship, life pushed forward with stubborn joy. Not all plebeians struggled equally. Some, like skilled artisans or successful merchants, carved out modest comfort. They wore slightly better tunics, ate slightly fresher food. But they, too, were reminded daily that Rome's bones were arranged in tiers, and they did not live near the top. Above them were the equestrians and senators. Men with names carved into marble, villas draped in ivy, slaves at their beck and call. These men walked differently, they spoke with certainty, moved with purpose. Their wealth bought insulation from hunger, from chaos, yet from even they were not free from Rome's unspoken law. Everything and everyone served the empire, and at its summit, above all, stood the emperor, Caesar, Imperator, the living embodiment of Roman power. To many, he was divine, anointed by the gods, above mortality, above question. His statues adorned the squares, his words reshaped provinces. His face, serene, calculated, eternal, gazed down from coins passed through the hands of beggars and generals alike. But even the emperor, in his marbled palace, knew unease, because Rome was not merely a city of strength. It was a city of tension. Every arch cast a shadow. Every feast was held in the memory of famine. And behind every public celebration, every roaring race at the Circus Maximus, every staged battle in the Colosseum, there was an unspoken understanding. The people must be kept fed and distracted. Bread and circuses, panem et circenses. The phrase had become a truth so ingrained, it no longer needed to be spoken aloud. In the stands of the amphitheater, 50,000 hearts beat as one, pounding, chanting, erupting with joy or fury. Gladiators clashed below, blood-soaking sand, muscles taut with violence. These men, often slaves or criminals, fought not just for survival, but for spectacle, for a fleeting glimpse of glory, for the chance to live another day. The people screamed, they cheered, they forgot, and the empire rolled forward. But what did it mean to be Roman in this age? To feel the weight of history pressing down upon your shoulders, to know that your every step was part of something vast, something eternal, something brutal and beautiful all at once. Did it feel like pride or burden? Was it freedom or illusion? Even as philosophers debated ethics in shaded porticos, as poets penned verses under fig trees, and scholars pored over scrolls in candlelight, the empire's undercurrent pulsed with contradiction. It was a world of brilliant ideas and institutional cruelty, of exquisite architecture and public executions, of soaring law and silent oppression. Yet somehow, through all its fractures, Rome endured. It adapted, it consumed and assimilated. It offered roads and governance, but demanded obedience. It offered citizenship, but only on its own terms. And so, the days passed, children grew into men. Men became soldiers. Soldiers returned home, or didn't. Wives kept homes burning with all lamps, whispering prayers to distant gods. Priests murmured rites, merchants counted coins beneath moonlight. And somewhere, far beyond the city's walls, new rebellions stirred, whispering of freedom, or vengeance, or simply hunger. But for now, Rome stood tall. Its statues gleamed in the midday sun. Its aqueducts poured clean water across thirsty stone. Its temples echoed with incense and oratory. Its empire stretched across seas and mountains, the Pax Romana, they called it, Roman peace. Yet even peace, in Rome, was held by the sword, and deep in the heart of the city, beneath the marble and mosaic, beneath the sermons and the songs, the quiet question remained. How long could it last? How long could an empire so vast, so proud, so brilliantly flawed, hold itself together? That question, unspoken but ever present, lingered in the eyes of senators, in the cries of merchants, in the hush before the games began. Rome was not yet falling. But the cracks had begun, hairline fractures beneath the gold, and even the most dazzling city cannot shine forever, not without shadow, not without cost. So close your eyes and listen. To the footsteps in the forum, the distant roar of lions, the rustle of silk robes and the scrape of whetstone against iron. The empire lives in these sounds, and in the silence between them. Our journey into Rome continues, but as we follow its pulse deeper into the corridors of power and the streets of survival, we must carry with us this truth, that every empire, even one as mighty as Rome, is built not just on stone and steel, but on people. And people break. The seasons in Rome did not change violently. They drifted, like perfume on the breeze, or ash from a distant pyre. Summer did not declare itself, but unfolded. The heat deepened slowly, seeping into stone and skin alike. Autumn arrived with the smell of crushed grapes and fallen leaves. Even time itself seemed more ceremonial here, bending to ritual rather than calendar. But within the empire, time was a more ruthless force, because while the streets of Rome shimmered with golden light, at the edges of the empire, out where the roads turned to dust and the Latin tongue faded into dialect, things were beginning to fray. It began, as most things do, not with a bang, but a quiet shift. The legions, once the steel backbone of Roman might, were changing. These were not the soldiers of Scipio or Caesar. They no longer marched for glory, for patria, for the eternal city. Many were no longer Roman at all. Recruited from the provinces, from Gaul, Thrace, Numidia, Germania, they fought for coin, for land, for survival. Some still held Roman loyalty in their hearts. Others merely wore it like armor, useful, but removable. Discipline declined, training softened, commanders grew corrupt. Battles that should have been won became retreats. Forts that once bristled with banners now stood half empty. The once invincible eagle standard, the Aquila, began to tremble in the wind. And still, Rome pretended. In the palaces of the Palatine Hill, senators bickered over laws while the empire's foundations groaned. Emperors came and went with disturbing speed, some poisoned, others assassinated, a few dying of age, but most consumed by intrigue and ambition. At one point, the throne changed hands 4 times in a single year. The title of emperor no longer guaranteed majesty, it guaranteed danger. Yet the machinery of Rome persisted. Grain ships still crossed the Mediterranean. Taxes still flowed from the provinces, though thinner, slower, under protest. Slaves still built, still harvested, still suffered in silence. The system was rusting, but not yet broken. Then came pressure from without. The so-called barbarians, a word Rome were no longer content to stay beyond the limes, the borders marked by forts and rivers and fear. These were not unwashed hordes, as Roman pride insisted. They were peoples, tribes, confederations, nations in flux. Displaced by hunger, pushed by other migrating tribes. Drawn toward Rome not out of hatred, but out of hope. The Visigoths, the Vandals, the Alans, Suebi, Franks, and later, the Huns. Like a storm with no warning, no pattern, no mercy, these groups did not march under one banner. They were not a unified invasion. They were something far more dangerous, a tide. Rome had always been able to absorb and adapt. It had turned former enemies into allies, foreigners into citizens, provinces into partners. But the tide was different. The tide did not negotiate. It rose, and Rome hesitated. Some emperors tried diplomacy. Others chose violence. A few chose both, promising sanctuary to refugees with one hand and sharpening swords with the other. In 376 AD, tens of thousands of Goths were allowed to cross the Danube, fleeing the Huns. They came starving, desperate, seeking peace. But Rome, overwhelmed and unprepared, treated them with cruelty and exploitation. It was a mistake. 2 years later, the Goths rebelled. The Battle of Adrianople followed. And for the first time in centuries, a Roman emperor was killed in combat by a foreign enemy. The empire gasped and kept going, but it would never truly recover. The frontiers grew softer. The economy thinned, the army fractured. Trade slowed, cities shrank. Roads, once so sacred and strong, fell into disrepair. And at the heart of it all, a question was spreading like smoke. What does it mean to be Roman? Was it a birthplace, a bloodline, a belief? When half the army spoke Gothic and the eastern provinces followed Greek customs, when temples were replaced by churches, and Caesar's image by a cross, was Rome still Rome? The answer depended on who you asked. To the elites, Rome was eternal, a divine order on earth destined to last forever. To the poor, Rome was hunger and taxes, a name that promised much and delivered little. To the Goths and Huns, Rome was myth and opportunity, rich, vulnerable, full of promise. And to the historians yet to come, Rome was a mirror reflecting the rise and fall of all great powers. In 410 AD, that mirror cracked. Alaric, king of the Visigoths, marched on Rome, not as a barbarian horde, but as a commander, strategic, patient, methodical. And when the gates finally opened, the city fell, the sack of Rome, the unthinkable. For the first time in 800 years, the eternal city had been breached by a foreign army. Not obliterated, not burned to ash, but violated. The world trembled, plundered. Rome, shamed. The city that once ruled the known world, had been humbled. But even then, it did not die. Not yet. The empire limped on, split now between east and west. The eastern half, what we call Byzantium, would continue for centuries. But the western half, the Rome of Julius Caesar and Marcus Aurelius, The Rome of senators and legions was nearing its dusk. And dusk is a strange it can feel like ending. Or like a beginning. And as the sun sank over the 7 hills, casting long shadows through the broken forums and crumbling villas, many still believed that Rome could rise again, that it would rise again. Because how could something so vast, so grand, so deeply woven into the fabric of the world, simply cease to exist? But all empires end not with an explosion, not with a single, cinematic collapse, but with a long, slow fading, a quiet undoing, a forgetting. And that is where we will go next, into the twilight of Rome, into the final years of emperors and generals, of stolen thrones and silent streets. Where the echoes of greatness become whispers. And the last light of empire dims, not in fury. The final chapters of Rome are not written in blood, but in dust. They are not shouted, but murmured in cracked Latin, in fading mosaics, in forgotten coinage unearthed by trembling hands. By the mid-5th century, the Western Roman Empire was not so much dying as dissolving, not all at once, not in fire, but piece by piece. A province lost here, a general assassinated there, a harvest failed, a treasury empty, a road abandoned. From Britain to Hispania, from Gaul to North Africa, the empire's outline had once wrapped the world like a golden thread. Now it frayed from the edges inward. And at its center, Rome herself, still proud, still beautiful, still echoing with old songs, but no longer in control. The emperors were now puppets, children, sometimes, other times cowards, or figureheads propped up by powerful generals, magister militum, who wielded the real authority. Some of these generals were Roman, many were not. One was Stilicho, a Vandal by birth but Roman by soul. He fought to hold the empire together with grim tenacity. He was loyal, brilliant, and ultimately executed. Betrayed by the same Senate he fought to protect. Another was Ricimer, a ruthless puppet master of half-Suebi blood. He installed and deposed emperors at will, ruling from the shadows, until even the shadows grew faint, and still. The world moved on. While Rome shrank, others grew. In Gaul, new kingdoms bloomed like wild flowers in the ruins. The Franks, the Burgundians, the Visigoths. In North Africa, the Vandals carved out their own state, controlling the grain that once fed Rome. In Britain, Roman villas gave way to Saxon villages. Latin faded into memory. What was once Rome became something else. And in the East, in Constantinople, a different Rome endured, stronger, richer, speaking Greek, not Latin, Christian, not pagan. Byzantium, they called it later, though they still called themselves Romans. But in the West, the idea of Rome had grown too heavy. To ancient. To hollow. It could no longer support its own mythology. Then came the moment historians often circle, mark, and name, for 76 AD, the year the Western Roman Empire ended. The emperor was a boy, Romulus Augustulus, ironically named after Rome's mythical founder and her first emperor. But there was no destiny in his rule, no glory. He was placed on the throne by his father, Orestes, then came Odoacer, a Germanic general in Roman service. He marched on Ravenna, deposed the boy emperor, and sent the imperial regalia, the crown, the purple robes, the eagle standard, back to Constantinople, a message, more than an act. There is no longer an emperor in the West. There is no need. Romulus was spared, exiled, given a pension. And silence. That was all. No final battle. No speech from the Senate. No burning of the Capitoline. Rome did not fall like a wall. It fell like a side. In the centuries that followed, people would walk through the ruins and not understand what they were seeing. Temples swallowed by ivy. Statues toppled. Roads sunken. Bathhous echoing with birdsong instead of laughter. Monks copied Virgil by candlelight, unsure of what the names even meant. Children played in amphitheaters, unaware that once emperors sat where grass now grew. But Rome had not disappeared. Not entirely. It lived on, in language, in law, in the dreams of kings who still called themselves Caesar in other tongues, Kaiser, Tsar. It lingered in churches, in architecture, in roads still used long after their makers vanished. Rome had fallen, but the idea of Rome endured. And in that sense, it never truly ended. Now close your eyes. Imagine the wind blowing through a broken archway. Imagine a raven perched on the last column of a ruined forum. Imagine the faint, distant sound of sandals on stone, but when you turn, no one is there. That is how empires die. Not with thunder. But with a whisper. And perhaps. They say the empire ended, but empires do not end so easily. A date may close a book, but history bleeds through the pages. In the years after 476, Rome did not vanish. It faded into legend, into language, into the very bones of Europe. In old cities, farmers built homes from fallen marble. In lonely monasteries, monks copied Roman texts without knowing Latin. And in the east, the empire still stood. Constantinople, the new Rome, watched from its gilded towers. Its people still called themselves Romans. Its emperors wore purple. Its armies still marched under eagles. And for a time, they believed they were the last light in a darkening world. Meanwhile, in the west, new kingdoms rose from the ashes. The Visigoths in Spain. The Ostrogoths in Italy. The Franks in Gaul. Their kings dressed like Romans, minted coins with Roman titles, wrote laws in fractured Latin. They ruled from palaces built with stolen stones, the ruins of a world they barely understood, but desperately wanted to inherit. Rome had become an inheritance, not of blood, but of meaning. To be Roman was no longer to live in Rome. It was to hold an idea. In the centuries that followed, this idea was reborn again and again. A Frankish warlord named Charlemagne, crowned emperor in 800 AD, claimed he had revived the Roman Empire in the West. The Pope placed a crown on his head and called him Imperator Minorum. But he did not rule from Rome. And he did not speak Latin. And the empire he ruled was not Roman. Still, the idea endured. In time, they would call it the Holy Roman Empire, a realm that Voltaire would later call neither holy, nor Roman, nor an empire. But names are powerful. Even the enemies of Rome became its heirs. The Germanic tribes that had once shattered its provinces now read its laws, wore its armor, prayed to its god. The Vandals were gone, the Huns scattered, the Ostrogoths absorbed, but the idea of Rome, its architecture, its prestige, its memory was more enduring than any army. You could not kill an idea with a sword. And still, the Eastern Empire stood. It endured for nearly 1,000 more years. The Byzantines fought off Persians, Arabs, Crusaders. They painted Christ in golden domes, debated theology in marble halls, and kept the old dream alive, though their tongue turned to Greek. But time spares nothing. In 1453, Constantinople fell. The last Roman emperor, Constantine XI, died defending the walls. And at last, after 2,206 years, Rome was gone, or was it? Even today, we drive on Roman roads. We speak in Latin echoes. Our laws, our buildings, our calendars, they are haunted by Rome. We write novels, make films, teach children about an empire that became a myth, and a myth that became a memory carved into the Western soul. Rome is gone, but Rome is also here. In the stones. In the silence. In the stories. Now close your eyes one last time. Imagine ruins beneath moonlight, a dry wind through arches, the soft crack of old marble under your step. Somewhere, far below the earth, a Roman coin still sleeps beneath the dust, and above, a full moon hangs over the forum, the same moon that watched Caesar, Trajan, Constantine, empires fall, but memory lingers. And in that memory, Rome dreams of Romano. There is no Rome. No emperor on a throne. No senate to bicker. No legions to march. Only ruins, and shadows, and stories. And yet, we still see Rome. We see it in stone domes. In marble columns rising from banks and cathedrals. We see it in books, in films, in strategy games. In mottos written in Latin. In titles like Senator, Consul, Caesar. We see it even in the stars. NASA named planets moons for Roman gods. Jupiter, Mars, Venus. The sky itself bears Roman names. And in dreams Rome becomes something else. Not a place, not a power, but a rhythm, a soft cadence of sandals on stone, a whisper of papyrus turning, a candle flickering in a villa long buried. It is the dream of order, of law, and roads, and empire. It is the fear of ruin, of fire, and fall, and forgetting. Sometimes, we dream of rebuilding it. We call our nations republics. We build domes like the Pantheon. We name buildings Capitol, Senate, Forum. As if by copying its shapes, we can borrow its permanence. But dreams do not last. Rome will not rise again. Not really. What we rebuild are reflections. What we remember are myths. What we long for is something that may never have existed. A golden age, just out of reach. A world where order held back the chaos. And yet, There's beauty in the ruin. There's stillness in the broken stones, a quiet that invites you to rest. To let go of the weight of history. To drift, like dust, through time. So now, let the marble fade, let the names blur, let the empire sleep. You've heard its rise, you've heard its fall, now listen. To its silence. To the wind through arches, the rain on broken tile, the hush of forgotten prayers. Close your eyes. You are walking through the ruins, alone and afraid. The world is vast, and old, and quiet. Somewhere in the distance, a Roman aqueduct catches the light of dawn. And for a moment, just a moment, you feel it again.
After
Not
Rome,
the empire. There were no grand farewells, no trumpet blasts echoing through the hills to signal that something immense had ended. The world didn't stop turning the day Rome fell, it simply turned a little quieter. The empire, once a living, breathing force stretching across continents, faded not with fire but with forgetting. Its end came in 100,000 moments that no one noticed at the time, when a fountain ran dry, when a road cracked and was never repaired, when the last senator walked home without a vote cast, when a statue's arm fell and no one cared to lift it. Life didn't stop, it changed. Farmers still sowed their seeds under Roman skies, though they no longer paid taxes to an emperor. Traders still set up stalls in old forums, though the coins in their hands bore strange symbols. Children still played in the shadow of ruined baths, and goats wandered the temples once filled with incense and oracles. The empire didn't collapse in an instant, it unraveled, slowly, gently, like parchment left to the wind. Somewhere, a soldier put down his sword. Somewhere, a slave walked free, and no one stopped him. Somewhere, the Latin tongue softened into new languages, and no one knew they were speaking history. The city of Rome itself became a ghost of its former self, its marble chipped and faded, its great arches opening into silence. Grass grew between the stones, statues lost their eyes, the Colosseum echoed only with wind. Yet the stars still wheeled overhead, as they always had, as they always will. And in that great, final hush, the hush that comes not with thunder but with dusk, Rome entered legend. A dream remembered by ruins, a story etched in stone. And as the centuries passed, the empire became not a place, but a question. Not a power, but a shadow. Tonight, as you lie still and quiet, you've walked those ancient roads in your mind. You felt the press of history like the weight of warm earth. And now, as sleep draws near, let the empire slip through your fingers. Let the marble crumble, let the aqueducts run dry. Let the Roman eagle fold its wings. Rome is sleeping. Long after the last legion vanished into dust, and long after the maps were redrawn without the name Rome, something of the empire remained, not in marble or gold, but in the quiet rituals of living. A shepherd lighting a fire in the ruins of a temple. A monk copying Virgil's verses by candlelight, not understanding every word but feeling their rhythm like a heartbeat from another world. A child playing with a broken coin, its emperor's face rubbed smooth by time. These were the after-echoes of an empire, small, human, unnoticed. Rome did not die, it dissolved into dreams. Its spirit floated between ages like smoke curling through trees. What had once been laws became customs. What had once been commands became whispers. The eagle no longer flew, but sometimes, in the golden hush before dawn, its shadow still passed over the hills. You could feel Rome in the stones, in the silence between church bells, in the roads that still led somewhere, even if no one remembered who paved them. Time moved on, slow and wide as a river. The world forgot the names of emperors, forgot which battles were won, forgot why so many roads were built, but it remembered Rome, vaguely, like a story half told by firelight. And maybe that's all that empires become in the end, stories. Tales passed between generations, reshaped with each telling, softened by centuries, until they no longer belong to history but to myth. And now, as the night deepens and your breath slows, you, too, carry that story. In the hush behind your thoughts, Rome drifts not as a fallen power, but as a quiet idea. An idea that once, long ago, the world was one. That roads connected the unknown, that order held back the dark. That somewhere, across the sea, there was always a city of marble and flame. Let that idea go now. Let it drift into the past like a coin sinking in a fountain. Let the columns collapse, let the language fade. Let the night take back its stars. Rome is gone, the story is over. You are safe now. You are still. Darkness falls slowly over the ruins of what once was, settling like dust on the fractured bones of the empire. The marble is cracked now, faded to chalky gray beneath centuries of wind and silence. Statues of forgotten gods tilt gently in the hush, their features softened by time, as if even stone has grown tired of remembering. The roads that once carried legions and emperors are now swallowed by weeds, their ancient stones warm under a sun that no longer shines for Rome. Somewhere far off, a breeze moves through olive branches, the same trees that shaded philosophers and generals long ago, and it whispers a lullaby of endings. There is no more clamor, no more crowds in the forum, no roar from the Circus Maximus. The voices have all fallen silent. The people who once walked these streets are gone, their lives folded into the soil, their laughter and sorrow melted into the silence of history. Rome, once eternal, now dreams beneath layers of earth and memory. There is no need to hold on. Let the columns crumble. Let the echoes fade. Let the empire sleep. And you, too, you who have wandered through this tale with me, let your breath slow. Let your eyes close. There is nothing left to know, nothing left to chase. All that remains is the soft hush of time unwinding, the distant beat of a world long past, and the stillness of night settling over the ashes of greatness. You are safe here. Let the dust of Rome drift through your thoughts, and let yourself drift with it, into stillness. Beneath the quiet hum of twilight skies, the empire still breathed, but it was the shallow breath of something old and wounded, something that knew its strength was slipping. Rome had grown too vast, too heavy, its limbs stretched across continents it could no longer feel. The heartbeat of the empire, once thunderous and proud, was now faint and irregular, disrupted by the tremors of unrest rising from its edges. In the east, the Persians pressed hard against crumbling borders. In the north, Germanic tribes stirred like storms on the horizon, watching with patient hunger as Rome, bloated by its own ambition, began to sag under the weight of its contradictions. Inside the walls of the capital, the rot was slower, quieter, but just as sure, a kind of decay that did not shout but whispered. Senators still wore their fine togas, and the temples still filled with incense, but something hollow rang beneath the rituals. The grain ships came late, the fountains sputtered. The crowds in the amphitheaters grew restless, their cheers more desperate than delighted. And behind the palaces of the emperors, where shadows pulled in marble halls, daggers passed between hands and loyalty faded like worn frescoes under damp. Emperors came and went in a blur of poison, intrigue, and blades, some reigning only weeks before their blood ran into the cracks of the stone. Power was no longer commanded but seized, held for a moment like breath in a drowning chest, then lost again. There were still triumphs, still moments of glory. A general might win a battle, an emperor might hold back the tide for another season, but each victory felt thinner than the last, like sunlight slipping through dying leaves. The people, once filled with the fire of citizenship and conquest, now lit their lamps early and locked their doors. They whispered of taxes, of plagues, of corrupt officials, of grain shortages. They did not speak of destiny anymore. That word had grown brittle, like a relic handled too many times. And yet, even in decline, Rome was beautiful. It was the kind of beauty only great ruins possess, not the shine of perfection, but the aching grace of survival. Its domes and arches still touched the sky. Its libraries, though quiet, still held the weight of knowledge. Its streets still echoed with the memory of sandals and chariots and voices raised in debate. The empire was dying, yes, but it was dying like a sunset, slowly, with dignity, wrapped in color and memory, as if the world itself could not bear to watch the light go out too fast. And so, with each passing year, Rome began to forget itself. Not all at once, no empire ever does, but in slow, almost tender fragments. A statue fell and was not replaced, a road cracked and was left to weeds. A law was passed and then quietly ignored. Somewhere along the edges of the empire, a fort was abandoned, its garrison gone without fanfare, and ivy climbed the stones as if claiming them for the earth. What once was mighty became myth, and what once was daily life turned into legend. Children born in distant provinces no longer learned Latin as their first language. They spoke in the rough dialects of tribes and villages, tongues rooted more in place than in empire. A merchant in Gaul might sell Roman goods but no longer feel Roman in his bones. A farmer in Britannia plowed his fields without tribute, without orders, without any word from the capital in years. The vast network that had once bound millions into a single identity loosened like old thread, still visible in places, still strong in a few knots, but mostly fraying into pieces. Even in the city of Rome itself, memory flickered. Grand libraries stood locked and dusty. Marble baths echoed with no voices. The Forum, once alive with orators, merchants, and citizens, now filled more with silence than with speech. People passed through it not with reverence, but with indifference, as if it were the shell of something they vaguely remembered. And yet, there were still echoes, ghosts that lingered in the colonnades, dreams trapped in stone. The wind that moved through the empty Senate chambers still seemed to carry the voices of Cicero and Cato, of Augustus and Hadrian, but the wind, like everything else, was changing. Rome no longer stood at the center of the world. It was becoming a relic, beautiful, enormous, tragic. People still told stories of its greatness, but now they did so by candlelight, in hushed tones, as if recalling a loved one long dead. And far beyond the ruins of Rome, where the empire's grasp had once been firm and unquestioned, the world began to turn without it. In the east, Constantinople gleamed with fragile pride, a half-remembered mirror of imperial glory, clinging to ceremony and marble and gold as if rituals alone could hold back the dark. In the north, forests swallowed Roman roads, and the tribes who once trembled at the eagle standard now wandered freely, naming their children with no memory of Caesar. Old temples were repurposed, forgotten gods slumbered beneath cracked pediments, and the Christian cross, once outlawed, now rose high above crumbling amphitheaters, casting long shadows over altars that once burned for Jupiter and Mars. The world was changing, but no one could say exactly when it had changed. There had been no single thunderclap, no day when Rome died, only a series of softer sounds, the closing of a door, the fading of a trumpet, the final brush of a chisel against marble left unfinished. Some whispered that the soul of Rome had not died but drifted, like smoke rising from the ashes, into the churches, into the languages, into the crowns of kings who would one day call themselves emperors. But it was not the same. It never could be. The rhythm of the world slowed, and with it, memory began to dream. The roads were still there, buried beneath earth and moss. The aqueducts still crossed hills like ancient spines, the law, the words, the ideas. All these lingered like echoes in a grand, empty hall. But the people who lived among these ruins did not always understand what they had inherited. They lived among ghosts, using columns as shelters, melting down statues for tools, and walking through colonnades built by ancestors they could no longer name. Rome had become a story, and like all stories, it began to change in the telling. What was real and what was imagined began to blur. And somewhere in that blur, in the long silence that followed empire, the Middle Ages were born. In the twilight that followed Rome's slow unraveling, the world did not fall into chaos all at once. Instead, it drifted softly into shadow, like the fading of a great fire whose embers still glowed beneath the ash. Fields once farmed by Roman hands grew wild and tangled. Villas crumbled as ivy crept along their mosaics, threading through forgotten thresholds where senators once strolled. The Latin tongue, once thundered in the Senate and etched into stone, fractured into softer dialects, worn down by time and silence. Villages rose where cities had stood, and knowledge that once passed freely, of medicine, of engineering, of astronomy, retreated into monasteries, locked behind walls of prayer and candlelight. The monks copied what they could in slow, looping script, not always understanding the words they preserved, yet sensing their weight, like relics from a vanished world. Outside their cloisters, kingdoms stirred, strange and rough-edged, where warlords crowned themselves kings and claimed descent from emperors they'd never seen. And through the forests and across the old Roman roads, now cracked, grass-filled, and barely remembered, stories traveled, of saints and miracles, of ancient battles, of Rome, now half myth, half memory. No one knew quite where the empire ended and the dream began. Was it in the sack of a city, the silence of a senate, the fall of a boy emperor, or was it simply a change in the rhythm of things, a slowing, a soft forgetting, like the hush that follows the last note of a long song? In this silence, something else began to grow, not in marble and law, but in wood and faith, in song and superstition. The world was dimmer now, but not dead. It had turned inward, hidden its light beneath cloaks of mist and moss. The age of emperors had passed, the age of legends had begun. Through the fog of centuries, the Roman name echoed faintly, like a whisper in the rafters of a forgotten hall. In distant lands, Where once Rome had marched in gleaming ranks, children now played among ruins without knowing the hands that built them. Moss clung to aqueducts that no longer carried water. Statues, worn faceless by wind and rain, stared blindly into overgrown courtyards where birds sang instead of orators. In Byzantium, the last flicker of Rome's flame, emperors still wore purple, still crowned themselves in ceremony that once meant something solid. But even there, time moved like water over stone. The world did not mourn Rome all at once. It mourned in pieces, a lost book here, a broken bridge there, a ritual forgotten, a coin with an emperor's face passed from hand to hand until the name on it meant nothing. And yet, even in forgetting, people remembered. They remembered not with clarity, but with longing. In smoky halls and candlelit chapels, tales were told of a golden age, of roads that stretched forever, of law and order, of Pax Romana, peace that once blanketed the known world. The truth of it no longer mattered. Rome had become a story, and in becoming a story, it lived on. Not in marble or metal, but in dreams. In every kingdom that called itself a new Rome, in every ruler who claimed Caesar's name, the ghost of the empire wandered, not seeking to return, but simply to be remembered. History, after all, is not a straight line. It is a circle, a slow turning of memory and myth. And as stars turned overhead and centuries passed like clouds, the world drifted deeper into the night, cradling the last embers of the eternal city. Far beyond the fallen walls and broken stone, where Rome had once sent its legions and planted its banners, life moved on in quiet, circular rhythms. Farmers tilled fields that had once fed armies, never knowing the names of the consuls whose grain taxes they would have paid. Shepherds led their flocks beneath ruined watchtowers, where no signal fires burned anymore. In candlelit monasteries perched on cliffs and nestled in forests, monks copied ancient texts letter by letter, preserving fragments of Roman law, philosophy, and forgotten poems, never understanding the full shape of the civilization they were saving from the dark. Even the sky seemed to forget, constellations named by Roman astronomers slowly reimagined by other cultures. Their stories were written in new tongues. And still, Rome lingered. It lingered not in splendor, but in echoes, a Latin phrase mumbled in a mass, a crumbling milestone at the edge of a dirt road, a dream of unity spoken by kings who ruled over fractured lands. Every now and then, someone would look back, a chronicler, a priest, an emperor in the north, and see in the haze of memory a vision of something vast, ordered, and immortal. But it was only a dream. Rome was no longer a place, nor even a time. It had become a shadow stretched across the soul of Europe, a feeling that something had been lost, something great and golden, like sunlight through a marble arch. And in this soft, slow remembering, as the world settled into the deeper dark of the medieval night, the ghost of the empire lay down among the ruins, not dead, but dreaming, waiting in silence beneath ivy and stars. And so the centuries turned, like pages softened by time, their corners curled by the breath of forgotten seasons. Rome, once the master of legions and law, of marble cities and marble gods, was now a whisper in the wind carried through moss-covered ruins and empty roads swallowed by grass. In the east, Constantinople held the flame a while longer, its domes catching the sun like distant memories of greatness, but even there the light flickered, fragile and alone. What had been an empire of stone and steel became a tapestry of myth, embroidered by poets, reinterpreted by kings, misremembered by wandering monks and dreaming peasants. Yet in all its fading, Rome became something strange, not a kingdom, not a memory, but a symbol. A dream that no longer needed to be real to be powerful. It lived in the architecture of cathedrals, in the language of treaties, in the ambitions of emperors yet unborn. Crusaders marched under Roman crosses. Scholars argued in Latin, and in hidden places of the mind, people still imagined a world united, ordered, eternal. The true collapse of Rome was not an event, but a silence that deepened slowly over generations, a sight too vast to hear all at once. And beneath that silence, the world slept, half remembering the empire that had once been everything, and now was everywhere. In dreams, it marched on, not with soldiers, but with shadows, not with glory, but with the quiet weight of all that had been lost. But even dreams must dissolve. The last echoes of Rome lingered not in thrones or armies, but in dust motes drifting through forgotten basilicas, in crumbling Latin etched into monastery margins by candlelight. The world moved on. Forests swallowed roads once paved with empire, rivers changed their course, and children were born who never knew the name of Caesar. Yet something remained, In the rustle of old maps, in the design of cities, in the ghostly rhythm of laws and languages, the Roman spirit folded itself quietly into the bones of civilization. It was no longer an empire but a ghost with weight, a silence that shaped how things fell into place. And so the Roman Empire did not end, not truly. It fell asleep beneath the world it had once built. A sleeping colossus beneath our feet, shaping paths, dreams, and ruins with every breathless century. We walk over it, live among its shadows, speak its echoes. And in the hush of night, when the world grows quiet and the stars glimmer like ancient coins tossed into a dark sea, we walk over it, live among its shadows, speak its echoes. And in the hush of night, when the world grows quiet and the stars glimmer like ancient coins tossed into a dark sea, we can almost hear it, the distant murmur of forgotten conquest, but in the simple, persistent pulse of human longing. The longing to build, to rule, to remember. The longing to rise above the dust and declare, even for a fleeting moment, that we were here, that our lives had meaning. This is what Rome was. Not merely a city or a senate or an empire, but a mirror held up to every age that came after it. A reminder of how high we can climb, and how far we can fall. In its theaters and aqueducts, we see our innovation. In its decadence, our excess. In its collapse, our warning. And in its stories, stories carved into stone, whispered through centuries, woven into dreams, we find pieces of ourselves. Rome, in the end, was not made of marble, but of people, flawed, brilliant, fragile people. They lived, they fought, they loved, they failed. And through them, we remember not just an empire, but the sheer human weight of history. So if you've listened this far, if the lamps are low and the night has folded gently around you, know this: you carry Rome within you. In the words you speak, in the roads you walk, in the questions that haunt your quiet moments, the empire may be gone. But the soul of Rome, its ambition, its beauty, its ruin, lives on, flickering softly in the dark. And now, as the shadows grow long and the echoes of empire drift into silence, let us leave Rome behind, not with trumpets or triumphs, but with the hush of dust settling on forgotten stones. The Palatine crumbles, the Senate is silent. The legions have marched into myth. All that remains is the stillness, that sacred, endless stillness that follows the fall of greatness. And in that stillness, we are left not with sorrow, but with awe. Because Rome was never meant to last forever. It was too vast, too bright, too human. Empires are born to burn. But from their ashes rise questions, dreams, and whispers, drifting like smoke across the centuries, into our own restless minds. Perhaps that is Rome's final gift, not its walls or wars, but the way it lingers. In lullabies of marble, in ruins bathed in moonlight, in the silence that comes when the last torch fades, and we are left alone with the stars. So close your eyes now. Let the weight of centuries slip from your shoulders. Let the empire sleep. It has earned its rest. Thank you, and so have you, for walking with me through the dust and gold of an empire long vanished. For stepping into the sandals of strangers, for listening to the heartbeat of a world both distant and familiar. History isn't just stories etched in stone. It's breath, it's bones, it's the slow unfolding of everything we are. And now, as the last embers of Rome flicker out in the distance, feel yourself letting go. No more marble columns, no more roaring crowds. Just the hush of memory, soft as candlelight. Let the weight of it settle gently into your chest, not as burden, but as comfort. You've wandered far tonight, across continents, through centuries. And now, it's time to come home, so dim the lights. Let the past slip beneath your skin, and if you feel the ghost of Rome in your dreams, let it stay a while. Let it rest with you. The empire sleeps now, and so should you. Good night. If this journey through the ancient world stirred something in you, if the echoes of Rome whispered softly through your headphones, let me know where in the world you joined from. Was it a quiet night in Lahore, a rainy morning in Dublin, a sleepless evening in Tokyo? I'd love to hear from you in the comments. If this story helped you rest, dream, or simply feel less alone in the dark, consider subscribing to Obscura Historia. There's always another forgotten path to walk, another faded empire to explore. You can dim the lights with us again next time. Until then, sleep well, dream deep, and remember, history is never